Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This week's security news update starts with a kind of a duh, in my opinion. I've always said this, but now I see other people saying the same thing. Wi-Fi security cameras are very popular, and they're popular for two reasons. One is they're easy to install because there's no wire. Typically, they're battery operated, solar charged, and they're cheap. On the other hand, Wi-Fi is very easy to jam. And so in this article, which I provide a link to in this week's newsletter, there's a couple of suggestions that these guys have for protecting yourself and actually having your security cameras work when the bad guys. Now, this is not going to be a problem with the local neighborhood drug dealer who's trying to break in and steal your TV set to score, a new drug buy. But if you're talking about anybody that's sophisticated, you can buy these jammers for $50 online, and that's all it takes. They jam the camera, and it doesn't talk to whatever it needs to talk to. Maybe some high-end, more sophisticated cameras will save the recording inside the camera. But anyway, not a good plan. So they have two suggestions. One is use hardwired cameras, which sort of defeats the purpose of why you bought the wireless camera in the first place. And the second one is use a camera with a cellular modem in it. The problem with that, of course, is that you have to have a cellular subscription. There's data charges, all kinds of things like that. So, bottom line is if security is important, don't use wireless cameras. And if you need some help figuring out what you should be doing, then give us a call. Next, smart door locks. I call that a bit of an oxymoron, or a lot of an oxymoron. We just see time and time again that the folks that are building these things, they're just trying to slam these things out and sell them for the least amount of money. They have horrible security, and the door lock is kind of the thing that's protecting your house. Keyed locks can be picked, of course, although there are locks that are pick resistant. Again, it's a function of, what's your level of comfort, what's your required level of security, and you got to decide all that. And once you do, you can figure out what's okay. In this particular case, this vendor, Chirp Systems, and I don't know how many different products are marketed under different brand labels that are actually their locks. But the passwords and the private keys are hard-coded into the app. So not terribly secure. Anybody that has the app, which you can download, has the key, and all of a sudden now they can unlock your door. So, the question becomes, what's important to you, security versus convenience? How secure is secure? And, if you need some help with this, then please reach out to us. Next, Duo suffers a breach. Well, sort of, they suffered a breach. I would say not really they suffered a breach, but it is a breach in the technical definition of the term. They have a third-party service provider that they use for telephone-based notifications for multi-factor authentication. It was compromised during some social engineering attack, and the hackers got away with call logs. Okay, for certain accounts. Okay, for March of this year. Okay, not clear this is really a big issue. I mean, clearly, we would prefer that didn't happen. But on the other hand, the question becomes, how important is it? And is it really, in the grand scheme of things, all these breaches we see, this is very, very, unless there's something they're not telling us yet, this is very, very minor. So hopefully it doesn't change. Next, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is breathing new life into software bills of material. SBOMs, or software bills of material, really important factor. It's the ingredient list for software. If you think about this, if you go to a restaurant or go buy some food at the store, and let's say you have an allergic reaction, let's say you're allergic to peanuts. So a real big problem if you don't know if there's peanuts in whatever it is you're buying or whatever it is you're eating. Same thing with software bills of material. We see, this piece of software, like last week I reported on XZ Live, which is a software library that's included in most Linux systems. Well, if you don't know whether XD Live is in the software product you're using or in the system that you're running on, that's the problem because it's vulnerable. So they've been doing seed funding to the tunes of millions of dollars. So seed's a relative term. But things are moving in the right direction. They've been funding 7 startups, and one of them, Protobomb, has been formally accepted by the Open Software Security Foundation. So they're going to adopt it and nurture it. So that's really great. There's 2 sort of semi-standards, maybe just large companies, SPDX and Cyclone DX, that are file formats for SBOMs. And what this software does is it converts between the 2. So that's very helpful to software makers or internal software developers that are trying to build a system. Maybe you're getting SBOMs from different vendors, suppliers that you're using. So this is not a silver bullet, but it's a big help. And the fact that DHS is funding these guys to go off and enhance this and really move things forward is a great thing. And hopefully it will help. But if you're not looking at what you need to do, and this is not legally, this particular initiative is just a government initiative, but that doesn't mean that it's only going to be a government initiative. What we often see is that large companies say, oh, well, this makes sense. We're going to require this as a matter of contract. It doesn't have to do with any legal requirements. So you may wind up in a situation of, oh, we're not going to buy your product, your piece of software, because you don't have an SBOM. It's happened to clients of ours in similar situations already, not with SBOMs in particular, but in general. Customers have requirements, and they can make those requirements whatever they want. Next, in the patches department, Delinea is scrambling to patch a critical flaw. They make privileged access management software, which is sort of ironic, I guess. They ignored the security researcher Johnny Yu, who's well known for months, and he just basically said, "The hell with it," and he published the vulnerability that required them to go off and take certain systems offline until they could develop a patch. And the moral of the story is, and I don't know who Johnny reached out to. He's pretty experienced, so I'm guessing he reached out to the right people. Well, he even reached out to Carnegie Mellon, the CERT, and these guys ignored the CERT also. So, question at hand here is, do you have a response protocol if someone calls or contacts you some way and tells you have a bug in your software? And does every employee know what that protocol is? And they should. Again, if you need help, let us know. In the legal department, the House passed a renewal of FISA 702, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's the bulk data collection part of the law, which allows the NSA to spy on, with limited caveats, a lot of caveats, limited conditions on American citizens. There's a lot of people who don't trust the NSA for a lot of and the FBI for a lot of different reasons. Some of them probably legit, but the current law was expired December 31st. Congress kicked it down the road till April 19th. But there's a provision in the law which allows the executive branch to reach out to the FISA court and ask the FISA court for a 1-year extension to allow. I don't know if they can do this year after year after year, but at least 1 year they can do it. They did that. So the reality is this April 19th deadline is sort of irrelevant, at least for the moment. On the other hand, if Congress can't get their act together and the executive branch goes around them, it sort of, makes people question the usefulness of Congress. So they do need to do something, but nonetheless, the urgency is gone. Right now, the way the bill is that the House passed, it would only renew the law for 2 years because some members of Congress are hoping that Trump will get reelected and then he'll abolish FISA. There's no evidence that he'll do that, but whatever. It is what it is. There were people who were pushing for the bill to renew the Section 702 with no sunset, which I think would be a disaster. Forcing Congress to actually consider the impact of their decisions on a recurring basis for things like surveillance I think is a good thing. But we'll see what happens. What's missing in this bill is any requirement for a warrant for snooping on Americans. There's a lot of people unhappy with that. I don't know what's going to happen. It turns out that Speaker Johnson in the House had to rely on a number of Democrats to get this bill passed. I don't think they want it to go back and forth through the House again. That would be likely problematic. So the Senate may just agree to it. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But, they call this thing the Pfizer Reform Act. The truth is, it's not a reform. The reform part of the bill, according to the Brennan Center, which is named after Supreme Court Justice Brennan, said that this would have stopped 2 out of 204,090 backdoor searches that the FBI conducted in 2022. So it doesn't sound like much of a reform to me. On the other hand, it may, the other thing it does is it expands the scope of surveillance that now the FBI or the NSA can come to damn near anybody and say, we need your help. And, oh, yeah, by the way, you can't complain and you can't tell anybody about it. If you do, you're committing a felony. So there's a lot of people who are unhappy about that. The FBI says, trust us, we wouldn't do that. The whole problem is that nobody trusts the FBI. Or I say nobody. A lot of people don't trust the FBI based on past actions. So there's, some interesting challenges there. This may or may not get done right now. We shall see. Next in the legal department, there's a crypto trader, Avraham Eisenberg. This is, interesting. This is a different kind of attack against a crypto exchange. It's not the typical software hack. It's a pump and dump scheme. So what he did was he deposited $5 million of stable coin, which obviously is a lot of money. So he had some resources available to him, into Mango markets. And then he opened a super big long position on them, which caused the stock price to jump 1,000% within an hour. That raised his collateral. His $5 million just went up dramatically. He then borrowed against other tokens and fled the country. Well, sort of he fled the country. He went to Puerto Rico. I'm not sure what he was thinking, why he thought Puerto Rico, maybe he didn't realize that was part of the United States. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure that we can extradite people to Puerto Rico, which in fact we did. And he was convicted of stealing $110 million. He said it was a legitimate trading scheme. I don't know that fleeing the country is ever considered a legitimate trading scheme, but he thinks it is. So we shall see. He was prosecuted by SDNY, which is the federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, which are super savvy in terms of tech stuff. They prosecute a lot of tech crimes. And we'll learn his sentence in a couple of months. And finally, in the legal department, Congress has added to the banned software list for congressionally owned devices, Microsoft Copilot. Now, they banned the free version of ChatGPT a couple of months ago. The whole idea here is they don't know where this data is going. Nobody else does either. And so they're just saying, nope, can't use it. And so, this is all part of the growing pains for AI and stuff like this, cloud-based services in general, I guess. So we shall see where this goes. But, ultimately, this is industry pushing these vendors to go off and be more transparent about what they're doing. In the education section, there's a great article by my buddy Dan Solow, who's at Georgetown Law. He's a professor there, called AI Algorithms and Awful Humans. And he talks about this whole shift between, well, we're going to use AI and that's going to solve all the world problems because humans are just really bad at making decisions. And then there's this other argument of, oh, well, AI is just being used to augment things. And I think we got to kind of sort it out. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm not Solomon, but I do think having these conversations are a really important thing. In the hacking department this week, there's a long list. A Chinese-owned semiconductor company, Nexperia, which is actually headquartered in the Netherlands, but owned by the Chinese, was hacked. The hackers are believed to be Eastern European and Russian. And, it's likely the Russians wanted the technology that these chip guys have. Alternatively, they'll take the money, I'm sure, but I think they probably wanted the chip technology. The Change Healthcare double extortion breach gets worse, right? First they paid them off for $22 million, and but then the hackers ran off and kept all the money. The people who had the data, they said, well, we didn't get any of this money. We want you to pay us again. And now they started leaking some of the 6 terabytes with the data that they have. And we're wondering how all these tens of thousands of providers whose data this is, how they're going to notify patients and blah, blah, blah. There's going to be, we've already seen it, a bunch of lawsuits. Maybe this is actually triple extortion, or maybe this is quadruple extortion if you consider all the lawyers that these guys are going to have to pay. So it's an ugly mess. It's just ugly. United Healthcare, which owns Change Healthcare, said that the breach has already cost them $872 million. So I think that qualifies as material. Of that, $595 million is for direct costs for restoring the systems, and they estimate the cost is going to be over $1 billion. If they've already spent $872 million, the lawsuits haven't even begun. I think this is going to be a lot more than $1 billion when we're done. Next, in the hacking department, the New York governor says there's a cyber attack on the legislature's systems that's holding up the state budget. They've reverted to stuff they did in the 1990s, which I'm assuming is a pencil and paper, and so they can get the budget. They can't even get the budget printed at this point. This follows the New York City cybersecurity incident from a couple of weeks ago, and the governor has made cybersecurity a pillar of her work since taking office, which is great. I don't know that she's accomplished very much, but she's taking credit for whatever she can. She's taking credit for one thing, for the new New York DFS 500 regulation, which is for financial service organizations, which is, it's good. It needed some updating. I'm not sure how much she had to do with that, but she's taking credit because that's what politicians do. And she appointed the state's first ever chief cyber officer, whatever that means. I don't know whether that's a CISO or if that's something else, but now they have one of those. And she also doubled the state's cybersecurity budget. Now, check this out. $61.9 million is double what the budget was in previous years. The state's budget is $237 billion. So this is roughly 2/100% of the state's budget. Now, if you think that's adequate, then you're an optimist. Most people think 3 to 5% is considered adequate. So they're at 2/100%. Next in the hacking department, 5 French cities near the River Loire on the west coast of France have been hit by a cyber attack. I'm guessing that they use the same provider, leaving the staff without the ability to access documents or get on with their work. They are now saying that it's going to be months before they recover. Obviously, these guys did not have much of a disaster recovery, and I think that's a typical problem you see with these small organizations, whether they're private industry or whether they're public sector. These small organizations just, they don't have the money, they don't have the expertise, they don't think it's going to happen, whatever their story is. And yet, time and time again, it does happen. So you can say, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the expertise, but the hackers, to be honest with you, don't really care. Next, and this is the last one in the hacking department this week. I could go on in the hacking department forever. Frontier Communications, which operates in 25 states. They do commercial and residential telecommunications, so that's internet and phone. And they were hit by a cyber attack. I'll say what it is, a ransomware attack. They filed their 8K with the SEC within 4 days. A little bit more information than some of these 8Ks we've seen, not a lot. But they took a bunch of systems offline as a result of the attack. They're not saying what kind of attack. They said that personal information was stolen. They're not saying how much or what kind. Likely, we're seeing, that the emperor has no clothes. And I think that's going to backfire for these companies. I think we're going to wind up, unfortunately for them, with more government regulation. And, I'm guessing they legitimately are pretty clueless in terms of what's going on, which tells me that they don't really have the monitoring and reporting systems they need to have. They do say that they don't think it'll affect them materially. We'll see. We'll see. I am not terribly convinced on that. Next, CISA is really going into overdrive in this one. I'll explain why. Initially, before I dug into it, I didn't quite understand why they're going quite so crazy, but now it makes sense. The company is called Cysense, and they got hacked. There's not a lot of news there. But what they do is they're a business analytics firm, and apparently they have all kinds of credentials for their customers. They have like 1,000 companies that are their customers, millions of credentials. And the hackers got into an AWS bucket where this stuff was stored. And as a result of that, the hackers have all these credentials. And there's no easy fix. It's not like, gee, we can release a patch and the problem goes away. This is a problem of people are going to have to change users' passwords, and they're going to need to change AWS API keys, and they're going to need to change this and they need to change that. Cysense understands that their customers have probably a lot of their customers are big companies, so they're going to say, gee, we want to be reimbursed for the cost of your failure to protect this stuff. You're just going to have to brute force. And one more time, this is where the supply chain gets you in trouble. And the question is, well, who's financially liable for that? Does the contract say that if they get hacked, that they're responsible for reimbursing you for it? My guess is probably not. That'd just be a guess. Don't know if that's the case, but I'm pretty confident that's the case. Question about, are your contracts written correctly? Next, the Federal Cyber Safety Board, and they've only met a couple times now. Once was for Log4j. This is the second time they're reviewing the Microsoft Exchange breach from last year. They basically say Microsoft fell down, go boom. They're much more interested in new features like moving the taskbar from the bottom left of the screen to the bottom middle of the screen, because that's really important, versus actually making their system secure and creating practices. Because this is totally self-inflicted. The problem they had there, it could have been totally prevented. A lot of different questions that people asked, and they came up with a bunch of different recommendations. You may remember Bill Gates in 2002 did a whole stand down for the entire company, try to add security to the culture, which I think he did do some made some progress there. But in the intervening 22 years, the company has forgotten some of those lessons and why they were great in the first place. So now is the time to go renew that. And Microsoft's management, the Cyber Safety Review Board blamed Microsoft's management and their board, which is not good from a legal standpoint. The question is, did your board and your management get this message in terms of who's to blame? They're not blaming any other people. They're blaming management and the board. Next, open source maintainers seem to be under attack. We saw the very creative attack against XZ Systems, which makes a compression library that's used in a lot of Linux systems, open source software. I'm not going to go into the details here. I did last week. The problem is that this is not easy to fix. Most of the open source software is maintained by, one or two people. They do it as a side gig when it's available. And it's pretty easy to compromise like these guys did. Pretty creative, but now that it's known, the creativity is no longer terribly creative. It just rinse and repeat. Next time, in this particular case, just because some Microsoft developers, what the heck is going on here? We averted a crisis. Next time we may not be so lucky. So words of the wise, consider your use of open source software. And to be honest, it's not any different than closed source software, but it's also not any better. Finally, the security news bites for this week. The feds give another chip maker a subsidy to build in the United States. This time they're building in Texas. Both of these guys are, the one last week was in Arizona, are getting about roughly a $6 billion subsidy. On the other hand, they're each spending about $40 to $60 billion to build these plants. So yeah, I mean, 10%, it's nice and they like it. Basically it's supposed to reflect, some of the cost difference of operating in the United States versus operating in unfriendly countries. But it's not like they're getting a free ride here by any stretch. MGM has filed suit against the Federal Trade Commission saying, and this is pretty creative, but lawyers can be creative. The FTC can't investigate them because the FTC chair was a guest at one of their hotels. Why? I don't get that, but this is up to the courts to figure out. It just seems pretty strange. Next, I titled this, "I Could Be Had, But I'm Not Cheap." Apparently, the hackers are paying employees of the phone companies $300 per phone to do a SIM swap so they can go steal people's accounts and access credentials. $300 for committing a felony that can land you in jail for quite a while. It doesn't seem like a really good plan on the people who are doing this felonious activity, but whatever. Next, MITRE was hacked. It's a bit embarrassing given their high-profile security firm. The bug is well known. It may not have been. I haven't seen the details of the timing yet. The bug is well known now, for sure. I don't know if it was well known at the time that they were compromised. They thought they got the bad guys out. It turns out they didn't get the bad guys out, which is also embarrassing. And it just goes to show you that even a company like MITRE doesn't do things perfectly. And last, the president issued an executive order on distributing personal data to known adversaries, people like China, for example. The data brokers, for the most part, and they're hopping mad because this affects their pocketbook. Data brokers will sell data to anybody who's check clears. That's their motto. And they don't like it that the feds are trying to clamp down on who they can sell data to. That's their business model. They have a business model that says, we got to be able to sell your data to whoever we want in order to make money. I understand that's their business model. I just don't think it's a particularly viable business model anymore. And, this we're trying to catch up with Europe. It'll take us years to catch up with Europe, but we're working on it. And in the meantime, there's going to be a lot of court fights and a lot of lawyers get rich. So with any of these stories, if you need help, please reach out to us. We're happy to do that. And otherwise, until next time, stay safe. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching. For more information or to purchase this or any other of our board or executive services, visit us at cybersecurity.com. Call us at 303-887-5864 or email us at rh@cybersecurity.com. Goodbye.